Hello and welcome to New Frontiers on CCTV International. I'm Ji Xiaojun in Beijing. And today we're continuing our series, which we've called Chinese Civilization. In it, we set out to illustrate the evolution of Chinese civilization through an investigation of archaeological discoveries, historical sites, and cultural relics. In today's program, we're going back to the Sui and Tang dynasties, roughly the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries. Now, this was a period during which China experienced particularly dynamic development. It is today recognized as one of the most brilliant eras in the history of Chinese civilization. Moreover, the building of the Grand Canal connecting China's north and south during the Sui dynasty encouraged unprecedented economic and social progress.
During the Sui and Tang dynasties, China went through a particularly dynamic period of development. As the country was being integrated, there were all kinds of innovations, while different schools of thought were improved upon and their teachings disseminated. There was unity among the nation's various ethnic groups, there was great stability throughout the country, and there was peace between China and foreign countries. Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism all coexisted peacefully, academic activities flourished, and literature and the arts in general developed more than ever before. It was a time of self-confidence in China, a time of inclusion and innovation. All in all, it was a brilliant era in the history of Chinese civilization. This is Baifu Spring. Water pours from the head of the stone dragon and then flows east through Tongzhou before emptying into the Grand Canal. This spring is, in fact, the northernmost source of water for the 2,000-kilometer-long Grand Canal. The Grand Canal was a great project of the ancient Chinese. It covered a very large area, was extremely practical, and had far-reaching significance for the Chinese people. Even today, the Grand Canal is open to navigation. The name Grand Canal suggests a single watercourse, but it actually consists of 4 canals. It stretches from Beijing all the way to Hangzhou in South China through the Yellow, Huaihe, and Yangtze rivers. And it is true to say that after the Sui and Tang dynasties, the Grand Canal continued to drive development in China. China had remained divided for more than 280 years since the Wei and Jin dynasties. But then, in the year 589, the Sui dynasty reunified the nation. It had taken the Western Han dynasty 70 years and the reigns of 4 emperors to make the nation prosperous. But the Sui dynasty managed to make China prosperous again during the reign of its first emperor. It is recorded that under the reign of Emperor Yang, just 2 of the country's warehouses held 2,600 hectolitres of grain and tens of millions of bolts of cloth. All this grain and cloth lasted until the early years of the Tang Dynasty, and from that time on, Chinese historians constantly praised the Sui dynasty for its prosperity. In the 1970s, archaeologists excavating the site of the Hanjia warehouse of the Sui and Tang dynasties uncovered storage facilities for large quantities of grain. After the Sui dynasty reunified China, it constructed a system of canals to connect China's north with its south. This 5,000-kilometre-long system began in the country's capital city Chang'an in the west, extended to Zhuozhun Prefecture in the north, and to Zhejiang Province in the south.
隋炀帝开凿的大运河是在世界水利工程史上都是非常辉煌的一项水利工程。当时隋炀帝开凿大运河的时候，是利用了战国以来沟通黄河、长江水系的一些水道，在这个基础上进一步系统的修成了这样一套的运河。那这些运河对中国历史后来的发展产生了非常重大的影响和作用。在当时隋代和唐代，其中最重要的一个作用是，它充分保障了当时世界上最大的城市长安城的物质供应。
China's rivers mostly flow from the west to the east, and so before the Sui dynasty, the history of the Central Plains was told in events that took place from west to east. However, with the Grand Canal, China's north and south became integrated, and so from the time of the Tang Dynasty, the history of China began to be about events taking place from the south to the north.
到了唐朝，经过了几十年、上百年的发展以后，运河的经济、社会，也包括军事上的价值发挥出来了。江南地区开始发展起来了。那么，如何把江南的财富运到关中，运到首善之区长安？这个如果没有运河是不可想象的。所以，运河在沟通南北、经济文化的交流、维护国家的统一，具有非常重要的作用。
The Grand Canal stimulated unprecedented economic and social development during the Sui and Tang dynasties. The Grand Canal not only encouraged new towns to appear along its course, but, more importantly, from the middle of the Tang dynasty, it helped incorporate the Yangtze River Valley into the country's economic strategy, and it helped shift the focus of China's economic development from the north to the south. The Tang dynasty was founded in the year 618, and it ushered in a new era of Chinese civilization. After Li Shimin ascended the throne to become Tang Emperor Taizong, he changed the title of his reign to Zhenguan, and with that, the famous Zhenguan period began.
The Grand Canal, by connecting China's north and south, played a major role in economic and cultural exchange. Well, the country's prosperity, both commercial and cultural, would go from strength to strength under the Tang Dynasty, especially after Emperor Li Shimin ascended the throne.
Unity among China's various ethnic groups had been enjoyed since the Wei, Jin, and southern and northern dynasties. But the political unification brought about by the Sui dynasty and the realignment of other factors led to vigorous social development. The Tang dynasty enjoyed political stability, its economy had recovered quickly, its people were happy, and social prosperity was increasing. The reunification of China was the greatest legacy of the Sui dynasty, but the dynasty also bestowed many other legacies for the Tang dynasty, most notably in the areas of the political framework, the administration of land, and the encouragement of an academic atmosphere. The Tang dynasty made use of and improved upon these fine legacies from the Sui dynasty. However, while it is true the Tang dynasty owed many of the favourable political and economic conditions to the Sui dynasty, the Tang court enjoyed popular support that the Sui dynasty never gained. In essence, the Zhenguan reign, or the reign of Tang Emperor Taizong, stressed the importance of the people as the foundation of the nation.
中国自古其实就有民本思想，这个商书里就有民为邦本， 本固邦林，到孟子的这个民贵君亲思想。这些思想虽然自古有之，但是唐太宗啊，我认为是实践的比较好的一个啊。他多次跟臣下讨论军民关系啊，军是舟，民是水，水能载舟，亦能覆舟。正是由于太宗呢有这样子的政治思想为指导，所以在他推行他的政策的时候，比较注重这个百姓的利益、百姓的感受，这样呢就形成了一个相对来说比较和谐的局面。
During the Sui dynasty, many cruel laws of the previous dynasties were abolished, and in the early years of the Tang dynasty, revisions were made to Sui laws. In the year 637, after more than a decade of preparation, the Tang dynasty introduced Zhenguan law, which stressed the importance of the life of the people. This law was further improved upon during the reign of Tang Emperor Gaozong to become China's first complete system of law. The most notable feature of the system of law was its humanitarian focus, which reflected the Tang civilization's stress on placing the people first. The civilization of the Tang dynasty was responsive to the demands, aspirations, interests, and creativity of the people, and this can be seen as the most admirable aspect of Tang civilization.
唐律的特点是，可以说是以人为本啊，废除了过去那种比较严酷的肉刑这样子东西，特别是对死刑非常慎重。凡是判死刑的，这个最终审核权是在中央，而且必须要由皇帝上报皇帝上报中央，要亲自这个审核3次，才能够判决死刑。
The period of the Zhenguan reign, or the reign of Tang Emperor Taizong, made the China of the Tang dynasty magnanimous, inclusive, and open to new ideas. Ethnic groups were integrated, diverse religious practices were tolerated, social harmony abounded, and people with talent were able to come to the fore. Chang'an, the capital city of the dynasty, was not only a major center for international business, but also a great stage for writers and artists. Before the Tang dynasty, Xi'an had been the capital city of the Zhou, Qin, Han, and Sui dynasties, a period covering more than 3,000 years. The Tang dynasty used the Sui dynasty's capital Daxing as its own capital and made no changes to it aside from renaming it Chang'an. At one point, Chang'an covered an area of 84 square kilometers, 7 times the area of the city of Xi'an as it was much later in the Ming and Qing dynasties. The city wall of Chang'an was 12 meters thick, and the circumference of the city was 37 kilometers, the same length as today's Third Ring Road in Beijing. Each of the north, south, west, and east walls of Chang'an City had 3 gates. The city was, in fact, a model of careful planning, with all streets extending either north to south or west to east. 11 north-south streets and 14 west-east streets equally divided the city into 110 neighborhoods. Juchue Street on the city's axis was more than 150 meters wide, double the width of today's Chang'an Avenue in Beijing. During the Zhenguan reign period, the emperor and his officials were praised for their honesty and love of the people. Tang Emperor Taizong was a man who had the human touch, a man of deep feeling. It is known, for example, that when his first wife died, he was overwhelmed by grief. It is also recorded that whenever he was reminded of the 6 fine steeds that had been with him through various wars, he would fall into sadness. Eventually, he had famous painter Yan Liban create paintings of the steeds in accordance with his accounts of them, and he had sculptors make stone sculptures of these horses and then had them placed within Jiaoling Mausoleum, where his first wife was buried. The Six Steeds of Jiaoling Mausoleum are great ancient Chinese relief works. However, unfortunately, an American by the name of Carl Whitting Bishop had the two best steeds, Sa Luzi and Juan Maogua, smuggled into the United States, where they are now on display in the University of Philadelphia Museum. The other steeds were recovered by local people while in the process of being smuggled, but they were broken.
Li Shiming and his officials were praised and admired for their honesty and for the love of the people. His reign was a period of magnanimity and inclusiveness. It was also a time of greater openness. And in 628, the great monk Xuanzang left Chang'an and headed westward in search of Buddhist scriptures.
Li Shimin, or Tang Emperor Taizong, was not the only man of great importance during the Tang Dynasty who showed considerable feeling. The great monk Xuanzang was another. Xuanzang knew what he wanted from life, and so, in spite of hardships and dangers, in the year 628 he left Chang'an and travelled to the Western Paradise to acquire important Buddhist scriptures. And it was a journey that involved taking the Silk Road. Xuanzang's westward journey wasn't made through the Tubo kingdom in Tibet, because at the time it was far from safe there, but things were about to change. In the year 640, Tibetan king Sungzan Ganbu proposed that he marry a woman of the ruling Tang Dynasty. Tang Emperor Li Shimin agreed and allowed him to marry Princess Wenchang. The princess went on to live in Tibet for about 40 years and was deeply loved by the Tibetans. Through the ancient Silk Road, the Tang Dynasty opened itself to the outside world, and it continued to use the Grand Canal to connect different parts of the north and south of the country. By the time Tang Emperor Xuanzong ascended the throne to celebrate the centenary of the dynasty, the country's population, the amount of arable land, and the nation's wealth had reached an all-time high. These are the ruins of the ancient kingdom of Gaochang in the Turpan Basin in Xinjiang. When monk Xuanzang passed through Gaochang on his famous westward journey, he found that most of the city's residents were Han people who'd been living here for generations. They'd lived in the area since the Han Dynasty hundreds of years before to avoid wars on the Central Plains. Since the 1950s, archaeologists have excavated some 500 ancient tombs at Astana Cemetery in Turpan, in the process unearthing tens of thousands of artifacts. These artifacts are evidence of the prosperity of the Central Plains during the Tang Dynasty. By the time Xuanzang finally returned to Chang'an via the Silk Road after 17 years of travel, the journey had taken him along 25,000 kilometers of roads to 110 different countries. The famous Chinese novel Journey to the West was based on Xuanzang's journey to ancient India to acquire Buddhist scriptures. When Xuanzang arrived back in Chang'an, he found it even more prosperous than when he set off on his journey to the west. Its streets were now crowded with business people, foreigners, camels, horses, restaurants, and tea houses. Xuanzang returned to Chang'an with 657 major Buddhist scriptures, and he was warmly received by the Tang court. Tang Emperor Taizong ordered that Xuanzang translate the scriptures in the city's Hongfu Temple. Over the decade that followed, Xuanzang translated around 1,330 volumes of Buddhist scriptures. More importantly, he wrote his book Record of the Western Regions, which provides detailed descriptions of the geography and local customs of the Western regions, Central Asia and South Asia. Xuanzang's book went on to serve as an important basis on which the Tang central government formed its policy for controlling its western borders. And even today, it is considered one of the world's most important ancient books on geography. It is also used as an important resource for studies of India. A History of Asia, written by the American historian Rhodes Murphy, includes a description of Chang'an during the Tang Dynasty. Chang'an was the eastern terminus of the trade route China had with Central Asia and countries farther away. The city ruled the largest empire the world had ever known, an empire that was bigger than the Han Empire and the Roman Empire. People from every part of Asia, Turks, Indians, Persians, Syrians, Vietnamese, Japanese, Jews, Arabs, and even Christians and Byzantines could be found in its streets, making the city an international one. The city was probably the world's biggest city, completed according to an overall plan. About 1 million people lived within its great city walls, and another million lived outside the walls. Chang'an, the capital of the Tang Dynasty, was magnificent and inclusive, and it was regarded in its time as the center of the world. The city was full of people from Asia and other parts of the world, and its streets were like a world market, an international fair that never closed.
《公元8世纪中叶吧，唐朝的人口是大概有7000万人口，啊，1300-1400万户。那个时候是世界上最大的国家，啊，当时地中海沿岸就几百万人口，啊，一直到了16世纪，它也才达到几千万人口，所以唐朝可以说是当时独步世界。
The Tang Dynasty was a period of ethnic integration, religious tolerance, social harmony, and intellectual freedom. Chang'an, the Tang capital, was not only a major center of international trade, but also a breeding ground for literary and artistic talent. With 1 million people living inside its walls and another million outside, Chang'an was regarded in its day as the center of the world. Thank you for staying with us on today's New Frontiers. I'm Ji Xiaojun from CCTV International. Goodbye.